Is Houston actually the best team in the Big 12, or have we been missing this the whole time? Let's get locked on Baylor.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Bears fans. Welcome to another evening edition of Locked On Baylor, brought to you by FanDuel. I'm your host, Cam Stewart of ESPN Central Texas and the Cam Show on Rogue Media Sports Network on YouTube. Thanks for making it your first listen today and every day. We're going to talk a little bit about the Houston Cougars, Baylor's opponent tonight, as well as kind of a look at the Big 12 as a whole after another chaotic weekend. So I stopped by with Locked On Big 12 host Drake Toll to talk about who is surging and who the upset picks are to win this conference. And then we'll take a little bit of a deeper look at what this UH team brings to the table and why this has to be a year, if not the year, for them. That's coming up on Locked On Baylor.
This week in Big 12 basketball. Man. Kansas losing to Kansas State. The way they did, Kansas ties Kansas State in the second half. They're down at halftime. Like, all right, a rally's coming, and it didn't. And guess what? Kansas State is 6-6, back to 500 in Big 12 play now, red hot. And then BYU, who just lost to Arizona after they were 6-4 in conference, they lose to Arizona. Then they're ahead at halftime, get blown out at Cincinnati. Texas Tech fights against Arizona. I guess I'm more worried about these teams are going to possibly miss the NCAA championship. What am I saying? NCAA tournament like Cincinnati or BYU. Then I am happy for the ones who look like they could win a national championship, because there are so many schools that had the potential and just aren't there.
Yeah, I mean, once again, it's a very educational weekend, and we learned that once again, Kansas frauds. I said this last week. I said this before the Baylor game. I knew what I was getting into in the event that Baylor lost that game to Kansas, but I said Kansas, they're fraudulent again. And I had Derek Johnson on the show last week. He convinced me it's not exactly like the 2024 season, but it feels a lot like the 2024 season. He said that they have great depth this year that they didn't have last year. And I think we've talked about it on the show, Drake, is like when it comes down to national championship teams, they actually don't have like a ton of depth. Like these teams aren't going 10 deep in the NCAA tournament. Like you got your 7 or 8 guys, and those are your 7 or 8 guys. And Kansas, they just it's not as simple as this, but they don't shoot well from 3. I mean, Kansas State shoots 40% in that game, and I think Kansas shot like 6-19. KJ Adams is like a player whom every other team in the conference would be like, yeah, sure, I'd take him. He'd be in my starting lineup. And Kansas fans are like, if you don't bench him, I want my Hall of Fame coach fired. And it's just kind of a mess there again. So maybe not the same way they were crumbling in 2024, but it feels like that same disconnection that we had with Kansas last year. And here, by the way, Kansas State, the whole time I'm saying on Locked On Baylor, Kansas is a bunch of frauds, I'm also saying Kansas State's not a tournament team. Are they a tournament team? Like they're making their way towards a tournament team. They have now beaten Kansas and Iowa State in the last 2 weeks. And overall, the margin of that's like what? 27, 28 points? 27 points between those 2 wins the last 2 weekends. The Tang Gang has picked up the pieces here.
It really, really sucks. And by the way, the reason I haven't brought up Houston yet is because they beat the piss out of a team that should – Colorado is hiring Deion Sanders to be its head basketball coach. That would probably do better than whatever's happening there right now. Houston is still the best team in the Big 12 right now, 11-1 in conference play. I want to talk about the teams for now that seem to be fluctuating in and out of not just contention, but in and out of tournament capabilities. Iowa State and Kansas both have suffered tough losses in the last week, but gotten big wins. You look at the way that Kansas pummeled Iowa State, and you think, oh, are they dead? And then Iowa State bounces back and just 82-52 TCU. And that's a TCU team that is, again, like flailing in and out of even NIT contention. You talk about Kansas State being back. I think the answer has to be yes. They're 12-11, but if you finish at 20-14, I mean, what have you done for me lately? Especially like that, you're walking your way.
You can call them. You can, if they finish 20-14, you can call them piss because you're in.
Yeah.
This is why he has me on. This is why he has
what
me
he
on
did
the show.
there.
This is...
And then it's just the swath of like 6-6 or 7-5 in conference play teams that are trying to figure out if that's good enough to be a tournament squad. Like a West Virginia and a Baylor, if they both have the same record, Baylor's going to get in over West Virginia because there is brand bias in college basketball. They know they want Scott Drew and the Baylor Bears in March Madness, whether that's fair or not. My question then falls on a West Virginia or a BYU, whether you're winning or losing. If you can't figure it out, like do one or the other. Either win all your games or lose all your games so somebody else can go or you yourself can go. Because I have still question marks about BYU, West Virginia, even a Utah that spoiled a lot of parties.
Was this like real deep cut here, but was that like a peppermint patty suggestion? Like one of them should just tank the rest of the season, just lose all the games.
Get the first overall pick at this offseason.
Dude, the thing with BYU is like, I don't know how much you can use this excuse in February, but that team, more than any other team in the Big 12, even though West Virginia is in the same boat, that team feels the most of like new staff, new guys, like that it just hasn't clicked yet.
Well, they can't figure their ish out. They've got 12 guys playing every night.
That's the big thing. That's why these teams don't have to go deep in the tournament, because by that point, and by this point, really, where the games are really starting to matter, you should know who your guys are. You should know what your 7 or 8 is right now. Yep. And that's not like playing 9 or 10 isn't typically the luxury that people think it is, unless you're like an all-time team. Right. And I doubt that BYU is that. I'm just going out on a limb. Don't think BYU is an all-time team right now. And West Virginia, while still on the cusp, has certainly looked better than last year. They don't feel like a team that's like, it's just not coming together. It's more of a team like it hasn't come together yet. Watch out when it does. That kind of thing. BYU is still running that kind of NBA offense. And some nights, against Baylor, they put up 95 in an overtime game. And then you get down in the mud, and Cincinnati, while not the best team in this conference by far, it certainly plays a brand of basketball that's like, hey, you want to get down in the mud? We'll play some. You can play your NBA game. We're going to play some Big 12 basketball here, and just takes it to them. Absolutely takes it to them. And I think Arizona might be the most slept-on team in America at this point.
Yeah.
They just took it to Tech the other day. That we were all saying was the best team in the conference now. And I agreed. Like, Tech looks that good. And Arizona now sitting atop this conference and just wiping away a team like Tech. The Cats, man. Watch out for the Cats.
I wore my BYU. I'm in Las Vegas for the Super Bowl, which is not where the game was played. Oops on my part. Wearing my BYU hoodie.
One of these years you'll be right.
Mandalay Bay and Aria and Caesars. People are like, damn. What's that guy doing here? That guy.
What the hell is a polar bear doing in Arlington, Texas? Today's episode of Locked On Baylor is brought to you by FanDuel. Now, football is over. Too bad, so sad. But now it's just in time because the NBA action is really just getting started. There's no better place to get in on that than with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip, or you want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay. I love using FanDuel. It's such an easy one to call to action for, because right now new customers for FanDuel can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Baylor, Houston tonight. Bears coming off a nice victory against UCF, but maybe a little bit more bad than good with Josh Ojamwina now out for the season, he announced about 10 minutes before the Super Bowl kicked off on Sunday. But not the news that we were hoping for, but honestly, probably a little bit of the news that we would expect. For those of you watching on YouTube, I am not wearing Cougar red. I am wearing BU red, actually. Beanpot Championship games tonight, and hopefully won't overlap too much with the Baylor basketball game. But this is going to be, I don't want to say a litmus test for Baylor, because we know that they're not at the level of Houston. They're not. And to me, that level is the best team in the Big 12. Houston and Arizona right now, with, obviously Tech and Iowa State, two teams I still really like, right just a hair below them. But Houston is still this Kelvin Sampson hellscape. Like the names have changed a little bit, but you know what you're getting in terms of like it's almost like the Nolan Richardson 40 minutes of hell, man. Like they're still comfortably the number one defensive team in the Big 12, and therefore, one of the best defensive teams in the nation. They are 7 points better than the next team in terms of defense in the Big 12. Think about that. 7 points better. That's incredible. They're willing to get down in the mud against you. I had some questions about Uzan, however you say it, going into the season. And when I watch him, he's pretty good. He's not Jamal Shed, but he's pretty damn good. Questions about LJ Cryer for this one, whether he's going to play, whether he's going to be 100%. I know this is a game that he looks forward to because it's a home game against his old team. But this is not even as intriguing as the matchup last year. I thought Baylor had a good shot at UH last year. Of course, the Cougs basically ran the table almost in the Big 12, and they ran the conference. They won it pretty easily. I thought Baylor had a shot against them last year and obviously lost in overtime, missed free throw at the end of the game that could have won it. But this year is not that. And one thing that really points out the differences between these two teams is what Fran Fraschilla said on the Mosley Show a few weeks ago. He was talking about Norchad Omier specifically and, what Scott Drew brought him in to be. And we all kind of know what it was, that gritty, kind of undersized, but real tough SOB that could play in the paint. And I said it, in fact, right when they got him, and it would have been the same way with Jonas Adu a little bit too, but more so with Norchad was I think he's going for the Houston model here. I think he's going for the Juwan Roberts model. And this does tie back into Mosley because he and I were talking about it at the tournament in Memphis last year, watching Houston. And Mosley pointed out, he was like, you hear about positionless basketball all the time, but it feels like Houston's actually implementing it. Like Roberts is not kind of the prototypical 7 foot, back to the basket kind of guy. He's tall and he's got a long wingspan and he's very athletic. He's very strong. He can out rebound bigger guys. He certainly did that against Hunter Dickinson a few times now. And Norchad seems to fit that mold, but Fran Fraschilla said about him, he's like, oh, he's nowhere close to Juwan Roberts. Like he's not the impact player Juwan Roberts is, who is one of the best impact players in the country. I know he's battled some injury this year. He's obviously back. I think Baylor needs to go nuclear from 3 tonight. And I don't see that. There's no game I can point to this year or no personnel I can point to even that you could say, yep, just wait. One of these games, they'll go nuts. Like even if UH has a bad shooting game, I would find it very difficult for this team to score against them. And having Langston Love back is nice. And maybe he can dial up some things, kind of going back to near his hometown. Maybe he could dial up some things and some different things you can do offensively. But I just don't know that they have the offensive versatility to break down a team like Houston. I thought last year they did. They could beat you outside. At times they could beat you inside with Yves Misi. They could go a little bit of both. They could go inside out on you and outside in. That team was pretty versatile offensively, even with such a pass-first point guard and Ray J. Dennis. But this team, it doesn't have that. It would take a miracle tonight. Maybe they have that in them. But Josh O, without him, that's not just a big loss for this game. It's really a big loss for the rest of the season. I was talking about it last night on this morning's show. Like that is a big time loss for Baylor. So for all of those that clown on him, and I have at times, but haven't the last 2 months or so, you're going to be realizing exactly how much he means to this team. Now, I do find this one last point interesting. Houston is a good team defending the 3. They're actually a better 3-point shooting team than they have been in years past. And the last 35 minutes of that game, Baylor played some real small ball on Saturday. Houston, I wouldn't say is a small ball team, but like we were kind of talking about, they're as positionless as some of these great teams in America are and have been the last couple of years. So can Baylor going small ball at least take them out of some mismatches a little bit? They don't have any big slow guys out there. They've got a bunch of undersized quick guys, except for maybe Langston Love coming back from not playing for a while. Can we, kind of make this a small ball game? And maybe it doesn't give Baylor an advantage in terms of, this is how they can exploit them, but maybe there's less exploitation because they are going small ball against Houston. Does that make sense? I don't know. I'm very rarely making sense. But I do think it's going to take a lot of things to go right for Baylor to win down at the Fertitta Center, however you say it. It's going to take a lot. Houston doesn't lose there a lot. I know they did to Tech last weekend, but that's probably an anomaly and shows how really good Tech is. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Who is the best team in this conference? Is Baylor playing them tonight? Let me know your score predictions down in the comments below. Be sure to like and subscribe. Helps out the channel a ton. You can also find us wherever you find your podcast. That helps us out even more. So leave us a comment. Ring that notification bell to get notified every time we're dropping videos on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. We'll have a breakdown of this one in tomorrow's show. We'll see you then on Locked On Baylor.